And here we are. Welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Chuck, with the man himself. And back from some wanderings around the world in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah,
Trip over the pond.
into did Austin to Atlanta to JFK to Bordeaux, France, and was there for the better part of 5 or 6 days. I'd have to look at a calendar that seems right in my head, but also the overall
Yep.
timeline kind of breaks. And then drove from Bordeaux to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Did a
Nice.
seminar there for the weekend, and then drove back down, and then flew back out of Bordeaux. Stopped in Paris along the way and dropped a couple friends and fellow coaches and employees off in Paris, and so a good time was
Nice.
had by all.
A good time was had by Hall. I think in some of our internal meetings for Fitfiliate, the reference was Charles was eating croissants and drinking coffee for the week. So that was the...
I put on 11 pounds in 9
Wow.
days. But I mean, I'll just like poop and
It's...
see it out. But mostly
Yeah.
it was croissants. I fucking love a good croissant.
And they don't come much better than over there. And it's interesting you've just had on this trip, because I had scheduled for things to talk about is, and I know that the point of this podcast is things for Liam to learn and to grow from as well. But some life lessons that travel teaches you, because it can be a pretty good teacher when it comes to things like resilience and, just being open to new experiences, new cultures, and make you an all-round better human. And we encourage, everyone should travel somewhere and be, get that experience.
I think that one of the largest downfalls of Western society in the Americas is that there's not more international travel, like as a built-in default for like Americans, specifically like Americans, Latin America and Central America. They still do a lot of travel to like different countries, but people in the States need to get out of the States, or, even within the States, like seek for more variance and variety. Travel is an incredible life lesson and teacher. And there's a lot of very tangible, tactical, like literal, like pieces of advice and guidance. But there are a few things quite like shit show travel that'll reveal somebody's character to you. So I think maybe in an earlier episode that like that had been a thing that we had talked about, that like worked out well for Vanessa and I. But if anybody is in an interpersonal relationship, whether it's romantic or like business partners, like whatever, if you need to vet an enormous timeline worth of like a relationship, like y'all just take a shitty international trip together, and like you'll see if you're compatible humans.
Yeah, that's why I look at those reality shows like The Amazing Race and stuff like that, where they, have to, work together, and it's like, oh, we're doing this to strengthen our relationship. I went, oh, you're not going to be a couple by the end of this.
Strengthen, pressure test, same.
Yeah, it just makes me laugh. Like, oh, this is travel at the extreme, and yeah, cool. That's the perfect person to do it with.
Well, and like, so I think that's like one of, not just like the people, personalities, relationships, but I think part of the nature of travel in the truer sense is that it gives us a tangible way to wrap our heads around the idea of the journey rather than the destination. Like if you in your travels, as you in your personal life, as in you and your goals, like in whatever construct any of those things are materialized, if you are wholly and solely focused on the destination or the outcome or like the goal itself, and you are not engaged and able to enjoy the process, man, you're going to have a bad fucking time.
Yep.
And travel's a good way to force you to just eat that truth in a digestible way, because 15 hours to get to the other side of the world's like a pretty fucking remarkable feat that should give us quite a pause for like gratitude and abundance and appreciation. But you're not there until you're there, so you might as well make the most of the process of getting there. And that is easier said than done, but planning certainly makes it a whole lot better. And so like trying to weave the ordinary and the esoteric together, travel is made much better when you have lower expectations and better preparation. And I think like those are also two huge life lessons. Like lower your expectations and double down on your preparation, and like you're probably going to end up pretty well off more often than not.
Yeah, you'll be pretty happy. It's and there's so many, you can plan and prepare, but there's so many variables that you just are out of your control. So it's learning to accept those and adapt to those. Like, you may have lined up 5 flights in a row, but just because you've done that doesn't mean the airline company's going to do that. Or, that's not necessary. And they don't care necessarily that you're upset about that it's ruined your timing. Like,
Well, right.
it's
Because at
just
the
what
end of
it
the day,
is.
like, well,
So how do
you
you
can
go?
still get to the other side of the fucking planet in 15 hours. Don't be a dick about it. And you're like, all right,
Yeah.
fair enough. Like, do you want to take your jet?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one grounds people at the airport real fast. I end up intermittently, just by the nature of who I am, being like this conflict resolver when travel gets really shitty and people are being like terrible to all the ticketing agents and the gate agents. It's easy enough to be loud enough and polite enough to reframe things for some other people.
Yeah.
You're like, oh,
And
so, flight's delayed 6 hours. Well, I guess at least we're not in a horse-drawn wagon and fucking 1842 trying to go New York to Oregon, and a third of us would die with dysentery by the time we got to the Mississippi. So, I guess 6 hours to get to the other side of the country, not that bad.
Not that bad. And it's, you could spend that delay time being pissed off and angry and, just absorb yourself in that. Whereas you could go, okay, well, I can't control it. Learn how to chill, and you have a much more relaxed, peaceful time out and try and look for the win in it. Like, oh, I get to finish my book or whatever. It's like,
yeah. Well, I mean,
you choose your path.
nothing you can fucking do. So
yeah,
yippee-ki-yay. Or I mean, or if it is bothersome enough to you, can you find a thing that you can do that is within your control? And I have had travel that has gone far enough sideways that the priority of the destination or the goal that reframed what the travel experience was going to be. And it's not always easy. But there have been times that I've rebooked to a different airport, to rent a car, to drive to another airport, to make another flight, because that's just how the hand of cards was dealt.
But you have that, if you can go about that and think, it's not the destination, it's a journey. It's like you have experiences then along that journey that you reflect on later, and it'll be a funny story or remember that time.
Yeah,
once you're out of the heat of the moment, you've got that thing.
That's a big consolation prize that I figured out early in life. I figured that out in my late teens or early 20s. As long as you didn't die, you're at least going to get a good story out of it. And on a long enough timeline, hopefully the lessons end up proving worth some weight. But
yeah,
it's true that usually the shit showier travel is, or a business situation, or a client, or insert whatever, the mess is the message, the struggle's the story. Those are the things that are the really generally more often than not, the defining milestone moments and experiences of our own lives. Probably had an enormous number of amazing Christmas mornings through your life, right? How sticky are most of those memories?
Yeah,
they're really not. The sticky memories are suffering. So if you can wear it with a fucking smile and find some perspective, then you're on your way to a life better lived.
And it's understanding that, seeing that you've got a capacity to deal with change and, being flexible, and when the shit does hit the fan, where's that resilience that we have that, okay, well, now I need to go into, I need to live in the solution, not, sitting here crying because my flight's cancelled isn't going to help me. Okay, how do I work around this now?
Well, and assume that the art of, or the travel itself is fine. Being in a different place is an immediate rewiring of your own expectations and reality. Let's say your travel goes great, but you end up in another country where you are separated from the cultures, the customs, you're separated from the language, you don't understand the currency, you don't know where anything is, you don't have phone service, you don't have Wi-Fi, and you're like, oh, I'm still this living human being, going about my shit. And I guess that, I just need to kind of figure it out, because we end up maybe there's an interesting reflection that is if we don't have enough external things to figure out, we're stuck trying to figure ourselves out. And that shit is way harder and messier, but it's easy to lose sight of figuring stuff out when you're in your day-to-day, because it is figured out. That your phone's going to work, that the lights are going to turn on, where all of your shit is, how to make money, spend money, where to get the things, where the people are, how to talk to them. But being dropped on the other side of the planet's an interesting opportunity to have all of those things point to nope.
Nope. And also not necessarily knowing where to go to resolve any of that. Like, when people travel, it's like, oh, well, what happens if I get sick? Or where do I go? Or are they going to be able to understand me to tell me even, simple things as in ordering meals or taxis or anything like that. And all of a sudden you go from living in this warm, comfortable bubble, and then you go, away from that, and it's like you're not the smartest person in the room
Yeah,
necessarily.
and if you
You're
can be
not
cool with
big
that,
dick energy. You've got
yeah,
to be humble.
it's
You
such
know,
an easy opportunity to grow so fast. Like if you can just embrace, maybe like one of the big lessons in travel, besides like rewriting expectations, is like, dude, you're gonna fuck it up. You're gonna
yep.
feel stupid. You're not gonna know how it works. People aren't gonna know what you're talking about. You're not gonna know what they're
Mhm.
talking about. Like, you sit in a very interesting place, truly into adulthood, when you are faced with another adult and you're like, I am about to shit my pants and I have no fucking clue how to get the rickety ass key to that rickety ass old bathroom in old timey fucking France in this like 300-year-old like shitter.
Yeah.
Hmm. It's just like, it's humbling in the best way that like, yeah, man, we're fucking fancy monkeys with cars and clothes. Like, yep,
Yeah.
everybody, no matter where they're at in the game, like everybody knows what it's like to be in a foreign country and have to poop and not know how to make that shit go down. And like that humanizes all of us. And like the beggars to the billionaires, everybody's had to take a desperate poop somewhere.
Somewhere. And it's, creates that little bit of empathy when it's flipped as well, that, you sometimes people can be impatient if they're dealing with someone who's, in their country and their English isn't great, or they don't know, well, why don't you know where the bathroom is? Or, it's pretty
Yeah.
simple for us. And then having that understanding and empathy going, well, yeah, if I was over there, I wouldn't necessarily know. And it's humbling, that you're not, the big person. It's like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm actually the bottom of the food chain here right now.
Yeah, like I am one step away from literally like a lost 8-year-old.
Yeah.
I'm a lost 38-year-old. Really, the
Yeah.
only thing is that like I'm just in a bigger body, and if you can help me out along the way, I have the ability to access some funds. But outside of that, like, yeah, you might as well be like a kid lost at the fucking supermarket.
Yeah, you got nothing. And like you said at the start, it really does show people's true character when they're in some of those situations. Like, we've all seen the stories or heard of people who go into that then, and instead of being humbled or, you know, just trying to navigate it, they go in with the full, big dick energy, and they're like demanding and you'll tell me, and that just does not work well.
Oh,
The bigger.
that's an interesting thing to watch fall flat on its face. I got a lot of exposure to that, honestly, growing up in Sarasota, because it's a huge tourism destination.
Mm,
And there's a lot of cultures, at least like what I have come to see of it, I would associate more with like a lot of in Latin America and the Middle East, people with like power, prominence, and like income. They're
mm,
used to being able to like reshape the world in a very different way.
yeah.
And you're just like, nope, that's not how it works at all. I've got
Nope.
one of my buddies spent some time coaching in the Middle East, and he said that like he would have people that would come in as clients, and they're like, so how much for a pull up? It's like,
Yeah.
it doesn't work like that. Like, not at all. Any amount of money
No.
will not fucking result. Like, it doesn't work like that. And they're like, right. But I said any amount of money. So how much does it take to get a pull up? And you're like,
Yeah.
I guess a reframe is in order. But yeah, man, it's wild to just be forced to like shape yourself around the world rather than have the ability to shape the world around you, because so many of your tools and your skills become so ineffective when you're separated
Mm,
from your ability to like read, write, speak, and have familiarity. So it's like a
yeah.
hugely valuable learning experience for sure.
And I think I was just thinking about it then, that travel sort of almost makes us, become more condensed. So, in our normal day to day lives, we have our houses and, spread out, and we can do whatever we want. When we travel, we're automatically stuck in this little flying tin can, and at close proximity with other people that you don't know, and you're all hurtling through space and time together. And then your world gets very small, ironically, when you're in somewhere that you don't know the language, you don't know, necessarily the customs and, you're trying to navigate yourself, and it's all of a sudden it's like on you, rather than I can look around and I can put
I
my
can
hand up
lean into the
and something will
social
happen.
collective. Like there's
Yeah.
enough other people here that'll help save the day for me if I get in over my head. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people that, like, at least I know for me that I very rarely do I get as much clarity and insight as I do when I travel.
Mm.
And there's also I was actually talking with Vanessa about this. So I went on my like merry gallivant about Europe for 9 days and got back immediately for her to head out to Phoenix to go like lecture and teach and train for 3 days. And we had a good conversation as she was coming back in, and found consistency with both of us. And I'm curious now to expand the sample size. But on the second half of the return trip travel, a profound feeling and sense of coming home has both of us very often sitting into much better states of gratitude and abundance. There's a lot of times that exiting for travel, especially on the front half of the first trip, is like a feeling of escapism almost, or like leaving problems behind, or like
I'm
going
getting away.
the sense of adventure. But the culmination of
Yeah.
the travel back is the return to home. And it's just, we ended up having a really good conversation that she's like, I spent probably an hour looking through old pictures and videos on my phone of like you and Liam and us building the house and the gym, our travel. And I was like, interesting. I do the same thing at the same point in my travel pretty consistently.
Yeah, look, it is. I know that when, I'm going somewhere, it's like, cool, the trip can take however long it takes. It's exciting, it's whatever. But when I know that I'm coming home, I just want to get home. I just want to be home. Like suddenly that 12-hour road trip, which was pretty cruisy on the way down, is awful on the way back. And it's the same thing. You're thinking about, the things that you have missed out on while you were there, and wanting to be home. I just want to get back to home. So, quite often if I've gone somewhere, and like even down to where we were parking the car before getting a flight, it's like, well, we could get the airport pickup service. I went, yeah, look, that's 45 minutes when we land. Like, I'm just going to want to get out of
Oh,
there and
dude,
get home. So
I am with
we're
you on that.
parking
I
at
don't
the airport.
mind the return trip itself, but
Yeah.
like those little pieces, I will fucking lose my shit. I will park I will park in the garage at the airport
Yep.
within like the first 3 floors. Like it has to be
Yes.
accessible. I won't park off site.
Yep.
Like get
No.
me back in control. I think that's the thing
Like,
for me, is really at that point, like I want to be in control again. And that's a big piece of
yeah.
it, because timelines probably don't really shift that much. But like one more thing that I could have otherwise mitigated would make me feel like a real fucking stupid asshole.
Well, and you're sitting there for half an hour waiting for someone to come and get you. It's like, if I'd parked at the airport, I could be in my car and I could be just about home by now.
Yep.
And so I've been, terrible on return trips, because I'm like, I just, if I get delayed. Many years ago, I lived in Sydney for a while, and, I'd fly back and forth, and guarantee on the trip back to home, wherever that was at that particular time, there'd be delays and stuff. You're like, I just want to get home. That's, and you walk through the door and you're like, this is,
it feels so good. It
yeah.
smells good. It feels good. The air is better.
And
Plus,
even
I'm lucky.
like that,
Vanessa almost always like leaves me a very nice, tidy, organized, clean house to come home to. I don't always do the same for her, but I'll usually get like a couple fucking projects done or something. No, small world shit. My first international trip was Sydney.
Oh wow, there you go.
That was
There you
the
go.
first time I traveled abroad, which was nice because it was still English speaking, but it was a devastating beating of a trip, just like as far as travel, the act itself goes. I think it was Tampa to Atlanta to LAX to Sydney. And that LAX to Sydney push is a fucking lifetime. I don't remember how long that actual flight is.
I think it's like 14 hours, something like that.
I wanted to say like 14 to 16. I think 14
Yeah.
one direction, 16 back, depending on how the wind is going.
Yeah.
And I hadn't realized until I was midway through that flight, like, holy shit, I've never sat for this long at any point in my entire life. And a lot of people are like, well, I've gone on these long road trips. Like, fuck you, buddy. Because when you go on a road trip, like, you get out, you get gas, you walk around that whole fucking shitty grocery
Yeah.
store. You get to go in like a real bathroom.
Yeah.
And when you're on a
No.
14-hour flight, you're just like, the most walking you do is in the aisle, but it's like terrible turbulence. You're like, I've taken
Yeah.
9 steps in the last
Yeah.
9 hours and I can feel blood clots forming. Like, this is so bad for me.
I know, like, so I've never traveled outside Australia, but I flew once from Sydney to Perth, and that was a 6.5 hour flight. And I'm
I'm gonna
like,
say 8. 8 would have been my guess, but yeah,
yeah.
Australia
And
is
I'm like,
pretty large.
what do I do for that? I'm used to a 2 hour flight. And I was like, what do I do in that time? Like, it was just, it was tough. And that
6
was
to
only
8
6
hours
hours.
is enough that like you have a psychological skill set for, because like 6 to 8 hours, like that's a work day, or that's like,
Yep.
a weekend hangout. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
6 to 8 hour blocks that have existed in most people's lives where like they can wrap their head around that amount of time, like not doing a thing. But like when you check off like 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 14, like it really is both the best and the worst. Honestly, like there's a huge piece of it for me. Very guilty adult pleasure that like I can just sit and devour an entire book.
Yeah.
Like, to be able to watch like 4 movies in a row.
Yeah.
There's some like real guilty pleasure shit on a long trip, but like you better be ready for your back to fucking hurt and your hip to be tight.
and loosen when you get there. I mean, for Australians to even get to the UK, it's a 24-hour flight. It's just,
there's just not good flight plans either. It'd probably be like it'd be from wherever you're at to Sydney to Singapore to Heathrow probably, and like
or Dubai, but it's a long hop.
So maybe like, I don't know, making long trips better. Have an expectation that it's going to be a shockingly long amount of time spent seated, especially if you don't factor in like the ability for it to go wrong. Like I have seen that break people on a plane, not in like a really dramatic, crazy way, but you've allocated mental bandwidth for a flight of like this length, but that's assuming that there's not like cancellations and delays beforehand. That's assuming that you don't like taxi out and sit on the tarmac for like an hour and a half with no AC or no bathroom. So just like be okay with the expectation that even on a longer flight, the flight itself might be the least of your worries. Pack fucking like get good headphones. Good headphones are a necessary thing past about 4 hours. You can kind of make it with like any headphones for about 4 hours, but then like after that, you really want some decent headphones. Have a good eye mask. Have ear plugs as well, because like sometimes you don't want to just like rock headphones because your ears start to feel like shit from both varieties, like in ear and over ear. You just don't want to have like that digging in, but like a nice foam pair of like earplugs, or if you get some actual fitted ones, those are good. So sleep mask, earplugs, headphones, those are necessary. I travel with Xanax. Like if I'm going to travel any type of big time zone difference, or if there's something that's going to be hugely disruptive to like my patterns, my sleep, or just sitting for a long time, take some Xanax. Not because I get like truly anxious, but it allows me to exercise more control with my state and like my sleep cycles and stuff. Travel with ibuprofen. Like, especially like those, that may listen to this, and I would venture to guess Liam will be like one of these dudes. Like if you do a fair bit of working out or moving, it starts to feel really shitty to not be able to move. And you might have some like low grade tendinopathy stuff that like you don't know is really bothersome. For me, like my knees feel fine as I go about daily life all the time, but after I pass about like 6 hours of sitting or so, whether it's in a flight or a car, like patellar tendinopathy stuff starts to feel kind of gross. So like ibuprofen is just a good thing to have, even if it's not for you, for a friend, because like, man, you run into somebody that's like going through their own version of travel hell. Being able to give them some ibuprofen is like, it is a gift from the gods. You really make somebody's day. Some tape. I'm a big fan of like some athletic tapes, like some cloth tape, because it's a little bit more resilient. It'll adhere to a bunch of different stuff that you don't always plan on necessarily taping. And you haven't vetted your shoes. Don't take brand new shoes on any kind of longer distance trip. Unless you fucking love playing it loose and fast and dangerous. I have seen new shoes wreck people in foreign countries, and then trying to like buy shoes and you can't figure out the sizing and your money doesn't fucking work right. Like you don't know where to go. You're like, I want to go to a Champs. And they're like, we don't have Champs now. I want to go to Foot Locker. I don't know what the fucking Foot Locker is. So like, pay attention to your footwear. What else? While we're going through,
be
I got
comfortable.
my bag in hand, so this is actually like pretty fitting that you asked. Get a good flashlight.
Oh, I've never thought about that.
Get a good flashlight and keep it in your carry-on bag. This thing has saved the day more times than I can count. More recently in France, when I thought I lost my passport for the return trip and was gonna have to go and make an appointment in Paris to go get an emergency passport, but it was hidden in the rental car. But I wouldn't have found it without the flashlight.
There you go. That's a good tip.
If you are traveling international, I would advocate for taking 2 different types of international power adapters in the event that one gets lost or broken, or in the event that like if you're not traveling alone, you'll be somebody's fucking savior when you were like 1,000 miles from anything else. They're like, I don't have an adapter, and you're like, I got you covered. So
yeah,
that one's for you, Sean. You're my one on the last trip. I take a lot of gum when I travel. I kind of like just move that through, but you don't know when, especially if you're going through a lot of altitude, when you're driving or flying, if like you end up needing like pressure sinus release stuff, that's helpful. Plus, super long flights, your teeth brushing cycles and cadence can get fucked up. And I'm really bad about like after I make it through security. Oh man, we can talk a lot about travel stuff. I got like. I have taken like a shitload of trips.
Which is what made me think about it, because I was like, you are very widely traveled through, life, but also through your different roles in life. So,
this is just like this is from basically like post COVID, because I didn't think about it until it was like too late. So these are
wow. Yep. Wow, and that's post COVID.
There might be like a little bit predating it, but like not a ton. And like that's for sure not a lifetime thing. That was like something I was like, oh, I haven't cleared this out in a while. And I was like, you know what? You should let it keep going.
It's really funny that everyone has a blip in their travel through COVID where, everything was grounded for a time, but it's, everyone's like, oh, here's all my trips. And now all they've got is Facebook memories to share of their trips, because they're like, haven't done a trip in 3 years, but now everything's opening up. Everyone's like, woohoo, get me on a plane. I'm out of here.
Yeah. No, the airports have been wild. This is for sure like the summer back to travel for people. I keep a specifically a zip up and zip down like hoodie in my carry-on bag when I travel. Zipper
to get on and
because
off.
it's easier to get on and off, but I will often put it on backwards on a flight, just like unzip my arms through, and then you've got like a sweet hood for taking naps. That works out pretty well. I take a lot of snacks. I usually take an enormous number of snacks. I will generally take enough snacks that when I go through security, I have pulled the snacks out separately to just let them run, because it like seems weird when somebody has like a bag of food. But don't be a dick with your snacks. As a caveat, like be a considerate human and not a shithead. I have seen people. I saw a lady just go like fucking at it with a can of tuna on a flight once. That was not okay.
That is not okay.
Steamed broccoli out of Tupperware, also not okay. I did have a dude roll in with like a gallon Ziploc bag who was sitting next to me full of grapes, just like entirely jam-packed. It was like a fucking brick of grapes, and he was trying to share them with everybody, and everybody was very suspect. I mean, nice gesture. But not grapes are a weird thing to share on a plane with strangers. Also, those are kind of delicate, so maybe don't travel with delicate food that can broken easily.
Yeah, and they can go through your bag as well.
Yeah, normally take like protein bars.
Yeah,
and some. I took a lot of popcorn for a long time. That one I think is a sticky one that I will stay with, because it lets me kind of just like mindlessly eat something with low caloric density, because I like to have a snack when I watch movies and when I read.
Yeah. And it's not going to kill you, but you can feel like you're having that little snack. And and you can buy them in the portable small little bags. And I definitely think being able to ensure that if you're going to rebottle things, that you need to have good lids and good seals.
Oh yeah.
I have wound up places where I've then gone into my toiletries bag and like there's just sludgy shampoo everywhere. You're like,
Yeah, if you're gonna take anything that isn't like super viscous and thick, like any kind of liquid that is a little bit more liquidy, I would individually bag it and then put it into a separate like bag of all the things. But I've
yeah,
seen that go wrong with Vanessa more often than myself.
yeah. That's just the products we usually carry with us. But yeah, there's just the amount of times where I've opened it and go, oh, that powder, it's just gone
And I
everywhere in
bet
that
the
spill.
first time it happened, you were fucking livid, and then the second time
Yeah,
you have it, you're like, travel shit.
just like, oh, just go get another one. It's fine. Just
Yep,
wash
you
it off, dump the bag, and go.
yeah, and like that is the nice thing about like when travel things do go awry or don't work out well, you'll be far better at managing it again in the future. And that is a nice piece of comfort to take in when bad travel situations arise, is knowing that the likelihood of that bad thing happening again in the future, as long as it's like a within reason thing, like hopefully you're not getting kidnapped multiple times, but like having
Yeah.
issues with your phone or your rental car or your hotel,
Yeah.
like things like that, it's like, dude, it's an inevitability.
Even traveling like domestically in Australia, I've had. We went to Sydney for something and rocked up at the hotel, and they're like, because we'd done it through a last minute, booking site or whatever, a discount booking site. Rock up to the hotel, no, there's no booking for you. We're like, shit, hey. And and we couldn't find the confirmation email because that actually hadn't come through.
Yep.
And then it's like, do you have any rooms? Because
Done that.
And you just kind of had that minute of, well, if they don't have rooms, where are we staying now tonight? Like, this is, we picked this because it was close to the airport and da 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 da. Yeah, and it just throws you for that second. It's like, okay, what now? They don't have a book. How can that be? And you're like, oh well, actually,
It
earlier I
is
didn't pay
often
attention that
user
I did
error. I
not.
have found that like there have
Yes.
been all kinds of times I wanted to be mad at somebody behind a desk, but man, the only person I could be mad at was that asshole in the mirror.
Yeah, and I hadn't done this booking, which was rare, and I just hadn't double checked it once it was done. So yeah.
Oh, I've booked entirely the wrong airport. The first seminar I did back from COVID was in Morgantown, West Virginia. I've mentioned that previously because that's where I was exposed to The Power of Moments by Chip Heath, which is one of my favorite books of all time. But I got into the airport and I mapped. Like I went to the fucking rental car pickup, picked up the rental car, got in there, put in my little Google Maps, plugged it in, got it all hooked up to the Bluetooth, and it was like, your drive time is 6 hours and 43 minutes. And I was like, that can't be right. I must have just copied and pasted like the wrong address. Nope. I had gone into, it was either like Pittsburgh or Philadelphia that I had flown into, and I should have flown into the other. But fuck me, right? And had that happen. I've done so many things wrong. I've booked like wrong dates, wrong locations. Unfortunately, like the more travel you do, I have found, at least for myself, that I get a little bit more complacent with it. And maybe it's because you weather so many storms where you're like, it's fine. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out. Then you're like, you could have made that a lot easier on yourself by just taking like 30 seconds and reading a little bit slower. And you're like, son of a bitch, my greatest enemy is myself once again.
Done it again. The other thing with travel is traveling that can cause people, stress, is traveling with kids and family in general.
Oh, yeah.
How have you tackled like taking Liam out and about? And
man,
we've spoken how he's
if we do anything, we generally do it big and dumb, and that's good. I'm gonna turn this light on real quick because it just got really rainy and dark, and so like my camera can't figure out the fucking white balance, which is why it looks like I don't know, just got like gamma radiation, like I'm a fucking transform into like a Red Hulk. So we have done a fair bit of travel with Liam his whole life, which up to this point, is 4.5 years, but that also includes COVID, so we kind of missed a window in there. But we moved from Sarasota to Austin when he was the better part of like 8 weeks old, something like that. So, like that was not only a long drive because we road tripped it because of the things that we were moving, but it's also, an entire relocation. And so that's for sure an element of travel. When he was he 1 or 2? It's when he was approaching It had to be going into being 2. It was the tail end of him being 1 because it was right before COVID. We went to, was it Switzerland or Sweden? It doesn't really matter. It was Switzerland. We went into Switzerland and then went from Switzerland to France for a ski snowboard trip. So did that as a fucking sizable long haul travel.
Yeah.
We knew that the travel itself and the jet lag would be problematic, but we for sure underestimated the continued difficulty of the time difference. You know, it's not quite like where you can rationalize yourself. You're like, all right, it's a 7-hour time difference. Like, I'm going to feel X, and this is the thing that I would want to do, and this is how I could like manage it well. So we, relative to travel with a kid, like pay attention to time zones, not just overall schedules, and also altitude. Because I think being up in the Alps was, I think he was more sensitive to that than we probably would have appreciated at the moment.
Yep. I remember Colin, who's a big fan of the show, he and his wife Jess had Poppy, and she was not 1 yet. I think she was about 8 or 9 months, and they headed off to the UK and Iceland with her on a big trip. And it's like, you know, she'd been sleeping really well up until that point, and then, you know, she started teething right on that trip, and she never slept great after that. And then recently he's just gone to Melbourne. Now he's got their second child, Henry. He's like, okay, traveling with 2. Totally different experience than going around the world with 1.
Traveling with 2, I don't have the ability to empathize. Like Liam is a challenging kid at times, and like in all the best ways, in all the ways that like I feel very, very confident about his ability to manage like life later on. But like, holy shit, does not make for an easy kid to travel with. But he's funny. So our trip to France, there was no like real travel debacle on the way over, but coming back, we were grounded on the tarmac forever. It was something mechanical, and so like, you know, the whole shit show. But
it's
like,
not reassuring.
Get out. They really prefer not to have to go back to the gate. And for anybody that's like, why would that be the case? Because if it's international and you've taxied out, if you go back to the gate from there, then you have to re-clear customs. So like, if you're ever international and you feel like, man, we've sat here for a long time, we should just go back to the airport. Don't wish that into the universe unless it's like absolutely necessary. But anyway, he was having like a hell of a time just being a vocal little dude on the flight on the tarmac waiting to come back. And like, we got a good sense that he loves attention, not in just the sense that most children and most humans do like attention, but he very much so values humor as a mechanism for attention. He very much so wants to be funny.
Yep.
Because we were sitting on the plane, and he eventually was like sitting there, he's like, I'm so bored. And he got chuckles from like the seats around us because everybody's like, yeah, me too, kid. And he's like, oh my God, I've got an audience.
Oh no.
It's taking forever. We've been here our whole lives. We will die here. And that was funny. His perception of time was wild. We had an iPad that we used at the time when we traveled like longer distances and drives with him, and it worked for sure for that, but then ended up being kind of like a device distraction issue at home. And it's wild to see how quickly like our dopamine receptors will wire themselves to that. So honestly, like it was not too long after that trip he'd gotten like I would say a fair bit like, you know, addicted to his like his iPad, and it got broken in the car and we just never fixed it. It's like the best thing that ever happened. But in those earlier stages when he was like little, I think I would still do it again. And then when you get to the ability to like reshape behavior a little bit easier, where there's not really a huge opportunity cost, I think like that's been managed pretty well.
And right on cue, this is the moment where Chuck was taken out by a storm. You may have heard some thunder earlier in the episode, and that took out the power. So now you're going to have to wait for part 2. So tune in later in the week where we'll get that uploaded for you. Hope you're enjoying the story so far, though, and trust me, part 2 is even better.